Hi, everybody. It's Tim Hagan, and welcome to another Wednesday workshop with Progress Coaching. You know, I think so often, in our space, we have so many great leaders out there. And I think about so many great team leaders out there, and so many great coaches, and so many great organizations doing, really great, innovative work. I think sometimes, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, is we tend to overcomplicate things. We tend to make them more than what they really are. And I know that's a little nebulous, but let me explain. I was out doing some research on Google and looking at bookstores and Amazon, and I was looking for something that combined coaching and feedback together. And then I looked for something that said questions and feedback together, and I really didn't find a lot. And it's interesting. So let's look at the fundamentals of coaching. Coaching is a scheduled interaction. It's typically question based. It really gives people the opportunity to learn and get clarification of their people, but more importantly, build self awareness in the people that are being coached. And then you have something called feedback, and feedback can be strength based. Here are the good things you're specifically doing well. And then feedback can also be constructive, or as we like to call it, opportunistic, where somebody can raise their game. And language and approaches and all those things matter. And I want you to think about, how do I combine feedback with coaching? And first of all, why would we do that? Let me make a comment that I think is interesting. Don't leave feedback alone. Don't leave it alone. Here's why. And I just did a speaking engagement at two different organizations, and I cracked this joke. I said, have you ever been in that meeting where you're talking to your employee and they're doing this, and you're really convincing yourself they're agreeing with you? You do know that they're nodding off, right? Everybody starts laughing. And I said, the reason I say that is when we're the only ones talking, we cannot get in their minds. But let me take a leap of faith. A lot of times when someone's doing like this, they're really saying, boy, I hope this is over soon. And we, again, and I've said this in prior sessions, we are very steadfast on the acceptance of feedback based on whether we agree with it or disagree with it. And I think we have to really reframe what feedback is. Framework is a perception a lot of the time. Feedback is also something that where somebody is doing something really well, strength-based feedback. And then when you look at something called opportunistic feedback, which is really the reason we call it opportunistic feedback, because it's early in the process of engaging with someone. And we tend to give feedback and we let it sit on its own. So let me give you an example of strength-based feedback. Joanne, here are the two things you're doing really, really well. You're inserting yourself as a positive teammate. You're really engaging more with your teammates. Now, let's say I'm coaching her on being a more influential teammate. When I give that feedback, she might start doing the nodding. What if I ended that feedback with, so hearing that feedback, Joanne, how are you going to positively maintain that? What are the specific actions I'm going to see that you're going to take it to the next level? So the feedback sets up the coaching question to drive the person's actions. Let me give you another one. So, Tom, I think where we have an opportunity to raise our game is for you to really insert yourself as a positive, influential teammate. I sense, whether fair or unfair, I sense at times you're pulled back a little bit, and you have an unbelievable track record of subject matter expertise. Hearing that, what are you going to do to embrace that influential leader status? What are you going to do to take it to the next level? What are the actions you're going to take? So what I just gave you were two examples of, one was strength-based feedback. The other one was constructive or opportunistic feedback. Okay. Now, more times than not, when we think about feedback, we go to the dreaded constructive feedback. I want to teach you something called the streetlights of feedback. The streetlights of feedback are green, yellow, and red. Green, we're in the infancy. It's an opportunity. The yellow light is, we've been talking for a while. I'm not seeing the improvement that I need. We need to kind of step on the acceleration pedal here. The red light moment is, we've been working at this a while. It needs to improve by tomorrow morning or very, very, very shortly. So when we're using feedback, keep one thing in mind. When we're using feedback, one of the best things that you can do is to ask questions afterwards. So when you use the feedback and the coaching questions together, it creates accountability. Don't let your voice be the only one in that room. Because when they're nodding, please don't assume that they're nodding in agreement. I'm going to have a bad neck. Um, the other thing that I would encourage you to utilize is something called reflective feedback in coaching. So let's go back. First, don't leave feedback alone. Ask questions. So let's say we're at a red light moment and John is just, we're at the breaking point. He's not inserting himself. He's being negative in meetings, let's say. And I'm going to say, John, I want to just give you a little bit of clarification and insight. Things need to improve in a very short period of time. We need you to become a more positive, influential teammate. Hearing that, I want you to give some thought to something. What you're going to do in a very short period of time to turn on that switch, because you need to. And I want to give you some time, and I want you to reflect. I want you to come back, and I want you to share with me 2 actions you're going to take to embrace this feedback positively and put it into action within the next week. That's a red light moment. See, a lot of times I think we get caught up in, well, you have to be really candid. You have to be very brutally honest. I don't think you have to be brutally honest. I don't think you have to be brutal. I think you have to be candid. I think you have to be clear. Yet I always encourage us to remember what motivates people. And that's the WIFT, WIIFT, what's in it for them. And so when you ask questions, and I go back to something called the motivator. If you ask questions, okay, if you ask questions and you know what motivates someone, you're ahead of 9 out of 10 leaders in this country, in the world. Because if John wants to become a future leader, and let's make it simple, and I say, John, one of the best things you can do right now is to start your leadership career by being a great teammate, being influential, going above and beyond the call, not negating, but praising your teammates' ideas and thoughts. Hearing that, John, what are you going to do to put into action in a very short period of time positively? What are the actions you're going to take? What do you need from me? What can we practice to make this feel more comfortable for you? So we can give feedback and then be inquisitive as to the actions we need to take. Notice I'm using the word we a lot. People will go there. People will travel. People will actually look in the mirror. People will change. People will challenge themselves more often when someone goes with them. So, a little bit of review. Don't leave feedback alone. Think about using reflection. And I love reflective feedback, giving feedback and saying, let's get back together. And then you create an anchor question and share with me what you're going to do to successfully embrace this feedback and what you're going to do going forward positively. What are those specific steps? Notice how I'm digging deep. And the other thing is when you use those feedback and coaching questions together, it creates accountability. Now, I want to go way back to the beginning, and I want to share with you what I think is the goal of feedback. See, I don't think the goal of feedback is to give feedback. I think the goal of feedback is to provide it thoughtfully and professionally so somebody receives it well and strategically utilizes it. Now, the goal of receiving feedback should be to embrace the objections embrace the feedback, is to eat the feedback up. Embrace, ask, and tell. I hear what you're saying. Do you mind if I get some more clarification? Let me tell you what I'm going to do. Think about that as you go forward, because I think at the baseline is something that we all inherit. And I've said it, I think in our last 3-4 sessions, we inherit people from high school and college. They've never been taught how to seek feedback. They've never been taught how to accept feedback. They've never been taught how to embrace it from a perception standpoint. It's not literal. So if a boss says, John, I don't think you're inserting yourself as a positive teammate, people instantly, emotionally take that out of context. They emotionally listen. They react to it. And all of a sudden it becomes a point of contention when it doesn't need to be. So when you're coaching feedback, we have to be conscientious of one thing. Feedback is a loaded gun. Excuse the crass analogy. It is a loaded weapon, and it cuts deep with people. People are sensitive. They lack self-awareness. They're emotional. I always love to coin these people, yeah, but Bobs. They already know you're wrong before the end of your first sentence. So think about how you can go about um, getting um, your people to seek feedback, how you can get your leaders to provide feedback with what I call follow-up questions. I love to use feedback with reflection time, and then you use an anchor question. And the anchor is, I'm going to put this anchor in the water. You're going to come back and pull it out when you're ready. And you're going to come back and you're going to share with me the action steps you're going to do to eat the feedback, embrace, ask, and tell. And what's so cool about this methodology or these concepts is it brings people together. I think one of my favorite stories about feedback is really more of a conflict example, but it's woven in feedback. I had a leader, and it was about a year ago. I actually attended, I think about a year ago. It was right when the pandemic started to, for lack of a better description, slow down. And this leader called me, he was a vice president. He said, look, I'm in charge of these two departments. And we did not, we're not working well together. They don't like each other. It's very confrontational. It's very territorial. That it's like two silos, but we're only two departments. I said, okay. So I'm sitting in a meeting, and I've got my pen out, and I'm drawing slash marks. And I've told this story before. And he looks over and goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm counting the number of acts of nonverbal discord." He said, "You're doing what? What's nonverbal discord?" And I said, "Watch when someone is speaking, the other person's reactions." It was things like, and they even look away. They don't look at the person. And we were up to, I think it was like 17 in the first 20 minutes of the meeting. He said, "Why are you counting that?" I said, "If I'm talking to you and we're whispering in the back of the room." I said, "When I'm talking to you and you say something to me," and I go, "What did I just say?" He said, "You just disagreed with me." I go, "That's what's happening the whole time." So what does that do to the person who's speaking? Does it calm them down? He goes, "No, it riles them up." I said, "Watch." So what we did is we inserted a feedback clarification through active listening before people presented their ideas. So cool, so stupidly simple. Is it slows down the cadence of interaction. I need to do this as much as anybody because obviously you can tell I go fast. So when you sit there and somebody's saying something, you were not in this meeting allowed to respond to their idea until you demonstrated you understood their idea through active listening. The person would say, "Okay, Joanne, so what I hear you saying is XYZ." And you could only deliver it in factual and business imperative terms, not your emotions like, "So what you're saying is our department's a bunch of jerks." We got rid of that. And all of a sudden, the leader called me and goes, "You're not going to believe this." So we just had our meeting, within 21 minutes, came to a very clear resolution. I said, "Oh, it's cool. What happened?" He said, "What was so amazing is that when somebody demonstrated active listening, the person said, 'No, no, no, sorry, that's not what I meant.'" He said it must have been well over 50% of the time. So we don't give people free passes when they give feedback. We don't give them free passes or latitude by saying, "Could you explain it a little bit further?" We immediately get defensive and we tense up in a lot of people's bodies, meaning we push back the feedback. So when you're coaching, asking questions is critical. When you're providing feedback, you can provide feedback, give them time to reflect. You can provide feedback and ask a question in the moment to embrace that feedback. Then teach your people to practice eating the feedback. Embrace, ask, and tell. Embrace, here's what I've heard you say. Ask, I want to make sure I understand it. I'm not arguing. T, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do to embrace this. And what happens is if you do that, and then you have, let's say, your population of individual contributors seeking out feedback on their own terms. And this is such a stupidly simple, novel concept, but we don't do it. I have a daughter in college, and she goes to Ithaca. And one of the things that I love about Bridget is she's very highly self-aware of who she is. And she once said to me, she said, "Yeah, Dad, this one company, they offered me a manager job." Now she's no longer there. I said, "Well, Bridge," I said, let me give you a dose of reality. You get in early, you show up on time, you stay late when the people need you, and you put in a good day's work. Sadly, those are differentiating factors today. The other thing that I think you do, and I'm not at work with you, I think you ask for feedback. She goes, "Oh, I do all the time." I said, "The coolest thing about feedback is that employees, individual contributors, really all people, have the opportunity to control feedback on their terms." So one of the icebreakers I do, and I'm working with a company Monday morning as I'm doing this recording out of Canada, and it'll be a virtual session. And one of the things that I love to ask is, what's one thing you loved about the course? I don't ask them what they disliked about the course, and it always gives positive accolades and feedback. I'm using a technique called framing. I'm framing out their responses. And when you do that, and you do that as a question after feedback, such as, what are the positive actions you're going to take? What are the positive actions you think people need from you? What are the positive actions we could practice together to make that transition comfortable for you? See, feedback plus questions is powerful. Don't leave feedback alone. Use it together. And if you have some people that are a little bit resistant, insert some reflective feedback in coaching. This will allow us to converse without judgment. So, as you go forward, I would encourage you to combine feedback and coaching. Now, I use a product called Restream, and I just want to share this with everybody. They're asking us to do this, not asking, but they're encouraging us to do it. And it is, for me, really kind of a cool when companies do stuff like this. There's actually a great company in Poland right now that does placement work. They are online job boards, things like that. And they're trying to get all these Ukrainians employed. They're giving them work. It's really cool. So do what you can. Just wanted to share it with everybody. So again, what I would just share with everybody is that I hope this has been helpful. Feedback and coaching. I think if we can go back to the simplicity, really good things will happen. Have a great week.